The night I finally told him how I felt, I remember the smell of cheap vanilla body spray mixing with warm pizza grease in someone's crowded kitchen. It was late July. Someone had left the back door open, and humid air kept drifting in every time people stepped out to the patio. I was standing near the counter pretending to read the labels on soda cans like I hadn't been rehearsing one sentence in my head for weeks. When I saw Mason by the hallway, laughing with two of our friends, I decided I was done waiting. I'd liked him for almost 2 years, not in a dramatic way, just steady, the kind of crush that becomes part of your routine. He was in the center of our group all through junior and senior year, always sliding into conversations like he belonged there, always making people feel noticed. When he remembered little things about me, like my weird allergy to kiwi or the fact that I hated driving at night, I took it too personally. I treated it like proof. That summer, after graduation, he started texting me more. Not constant, but enough to make me feel like there was a pattern. He'd send me something funny at midnight, ask if I wanted to get coffee, say he was bored and wanted to drive around. Once or twice, it was just the two of us. I told myself it meant something. At the party, I waited until he was alone for a second. My hands were damp, so I wiped them on my jeans and tried to breathe in a way that didn't make my chest feel tight. "Hey," I said. He turned toward me with that easy smile that used to knock the air out of my lungs. "Hey," he said back, like we had all the time in the world. I nodded toward the back porch, away from the music. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" He followed me without hesitation. Outside, the patio light was a dull yellow bulb, and it made everything look slightly tired. A few people stood near the railing talking. Someone's phone speaker was playing music, tinny and too loud. I walked a little farther toward the side of the yard where the noise thinned out. He leaned back against the siding like he was comfortable, like nothing hard was about to happen. I stood there, palms open at my sides, trying not to look like I was bracing for impact. I started, then stopped. I swallowed. "I've liked you for a long time, and I don't really know how to say it without sounding stupid, but I needed to tell you." He blinked once like he was processing. Then his face shifted into something warm. He pushed off the wall and stepped closer. His voice dropped a little, softer than it had been inside. "I was wondering when you'd say something," he said. I felt my whole body go still. He smiled like he was relieved. "I like you too. I have for months. I just didn't want to mess up our friendship by being the one to do something first." For a moment, everything in my head went quiet, like someone had turned off the noise. I could hear a sprinkler in the neighbor's yard. I could hear my own breathing. He glanced at my mouth, then back up to my eyes. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. I said yes. It was my first kiss. For about 30 seconds, it felt exactly like the kind of moment I'd pictured in the privacy of my own room, lying on my bed with my phone glowing in my hand. I remember the texture of his hoodie under my fingers and the way my knees went slightly weak in a way I didn't expect. Then I heard laughter, not a small laugh, not one person trying to be quiet. Real, open laughter. I pulled back before he did, confused for half a second, like I was waiting for the sound to make sense. At the back door, framed by the kitchen light, were 3 guys from our friend group. One of them was bent forward, holding his stomach. Another was slow clapping like he was watching a show. Their faces were turned toward us, bright with amusement. Mason pulled away fully and looked right at them. He had this grin on his face that didn't match anything that had just happened. He raised his voice slightly, like he wanted everyone to hear. "I told you she'd fall for it." My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. I didn't say anything. I don't think I could have. My throat closed up like it had its own reflexes. One of the guys at the door said something about a bet. I didn't catch all the words. I didn't need to. The way Mason stood there, relaxed, pleased with himself, told me exactly what I was. A dare, a game, entertainment. I remember looking at the porch railing because it was easier than looking at anyone's face. The paint was chipped. There was a small rust stain near one screw. My brain grabbed onto those details like they were stable ground. Someone behind me laughed again. Mason didn't apologize. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look like he'd been pushed into it. He looked proud. I don't remember walking back through the house. I don't remember getting my keys. I only remember the sensation of being outside again, the air thicker, my skin suddenly cold. I got into my car and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard like I needed it to tell me what to do next. My phone buzzed once. I didn't look at it. I drove without really thinking about it until I pulled into a grocery store parking lot a few minutes away. The lot was mostly empty. The overhead lights made pale circles on the pavement. That's where I finally started crying. Not quietly, the kind of crying that makes your chest tighten and your face ache and your breath come out in short, broken pieces. I sat there until it slowed down enough that I could breathe again. I went home after that and didn't tell my parents what happened. Not that night, not the next day. But the story didn't stay quiet. By the end of that week, people from our group were mentioning it like it was a funny moment, like it was a harmless prank, like I was supposed to smile and take it. I didn't fight with anyone. I didn't beg anyone to stop talking about it. I just got smaller. I stayed in my room. I said I was tired. I said I had a headache. I watched the days slide by and felt this steady, dull embarrassment that didn't let up. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched a little, even when it was just my aunt texting me about college supplies. I'd planned to go to a university about 4 hours away. I'd been excited. After that party, I started dreading it, not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't know how to carry myself like a normal person again. By the time August came, I was counting down to leaving like it was an escape plan. The day before I moved into my dorm, my mom asked if I was nervous. I told her I was fine. That night, I packed in silence, folded shirts, rolled socks, placed things into boxes like I was organizing a version of myself I still understood. Before I went to sleep, I opened my laptop and checked my class schedule again, even though I already knew it. I stared at my campus ID photo, the one taken in a harsh light that made me look younger than I felt. Then my phone lit up with a notification from a group chat I hadn't opened in days. I didn't tap it right away. I just watched the screen glow on my comforter, and I noticed for the first time that my hands weren't shaking anymore. Then I waited. Move-in day was loud in a very specific way. Doors thudding, someone's dad dragging a mini fridge down the hall, the constant beep of elevator buttons getting pressed like people were afraid the doors would close without them. I kept my face neutral and did what needed doing. Unpacked. Made the bed. Lined up toiletries on the sink-like order could act as proof that I was fine. My roommate, Kara, talked the whole time, filling the room with little facts about herself, where she was from, what she was studying, how she hated the dining hall already. I nodded in the right places and answered when she asked questions, but I didn't offer much. I was still in that stage where speaking felt risky, like anything personal might get used against me. That first week, I moved through campus like I was visiting someone else's life. I studied the signs, followed the flow of people, kept my schedule pulled up on my phone. I ate alone twice, then decided I couldn't do that all semester without feeling worse. So I started small. I went to a club fair and forced myself to stop at 3 tables. I signed up for an environmental volunteer group because they were handing out tiny packets of wildflower seeds, and it felt harmless. I joined a study skills workshop that met once a week in the library basement. I showed up to a dorm movie night, even though I didn't care about the movie. None of it was brave in a cinematic way. It was more like brushing your teeth. You do it because the alternative gets worse. I kept my life organized in ways I hadn't before. I bought a simple planner. I wrote down deadlines, office hours, club meetings, workout times. I tracked expenses in a notes app because I didn't want to call my parents asking for money. I built routines that didn't leave much room for spiraling. It helped. By October, I had a coffee order that made me feel like a real person. I had a seat in my chemistry lecture where the light didn't glare off my laptop. I had a small group of people I could eat with without having to perform too hard. The main one was Tessa. I met her in the environmental group when we spent a Saturday morning pulling trash out of a creek behind the athletic fields. We wore rubber gloves and old sneakers and complained quietly about the smell. She was calm and funny in a low-key way, not trying to be the center, just present. Afterward, she asked if I wanted to grab lunch, like it was the most normal thing in the world. That was the first time I noticed something shifting in me. Not confidence exactly, but steadiness. I didn't have to earn my place by being entertaining or easy to mess with. I just had to show up and be decent. My first year ended without any major drama. That felt like a win. Sophomore year, I started working out regularly, not because I was trying to punish myself, more because moving my body made my mind quieter. I learned what routines actually worked for me and which ones were just internet advice. I lifted weights, I walked a lot, I slept more. My hair changed because I stopped letting it be an afterthought. I figured out a basic style I could do quickly and still feel put together. I bought a couple outfits that fit properly instead of whatever was cheapest on sale. Little things, practical things. And somehow, over time, those things added up into a version of me that felt harder to shake. By junior year, I wasn't thinking about high school often. It came up occasionally, like a random memory when you hear an old song, but it didn't have weight. I dated a little, nothing serious. Mostly I learned what it felt like when someone was genuinely interested and consistent. I learned what I didn't like too, the people who liked attention more than they liked me. I also got good at being observant, not in a paranoid way, just aware. If someone was trying to steer me into a corner conversation, I noticed. If someone's friendliness felt performative, I took a mental step back. I didn't confront every small thing. I just adjusted. I learned that boundaries can be quiet. That fall, I started a research project with one of my professors. It wasn't glamorous, mostly data cleaning, spreadsheets, meeting notes, and lab time that smelled faintly like dust and marker ink. But it gave me something solid. I had responsibilities, deadlines, systems. I liked the feeling of being competent at something that didn't depend on anyone liking me. I kept records of everything because the project required it. Logs of what I ran, notes of what changed, versions saved with clear names. It made me calm. When you have a paper trail, you don't have to rely on anyone's memory. In late August, right before the semester started, Tessa and I were sitting on the floor of our apartment sorting through mail. The air conditioner was working too hard and rattling. We had a pile of campus flyers, a grocery coupon booklet, and the thick envelope with our updated schedules. Tessa held up a postcard for a welcome event and said, "You want to go, or do we want to pretend we're above it?" I laughed and said we could go for 5 minutes, then leave. She flipped through her class list on her laptop and made a face. "I swear they keep trying to ruin my mornings." I looked at my own schedule. 2 labs, a seminar, a required stats class that met at 8 a.m. for reasons I still don't understand. Then I opened the student portal again because I needed the textbook codes, and a small alert popped up on the side panel. It was the kind of notification I usually ignored. "New student added to your shared course section." I clicked it without thinking. The name on the roster took a second to land, like my brain wanted to reject it on principle. Mason Keller. I stared at the screen. The room felt very quiet, even though the air conditioner was still rattling. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. Tessa was still talking, but her voice faded into background noise. I didn't say anything yet. I just looked at his name sitting there like it belonged in my life again. Then I closed my laptop, slowly, like I was putting a lid on something I didn't want spilling out. The next morning, I didn't wake up in a panic. I woke up the way I usually did, to my alarm and the faint sound of someone running water in the unit next door. I made coffee. I ate a piece of toast standing at the counter. I looked at my calendar. Stats at 8. Lab meeting at 10. Research block from 1 to 4. His name stayed in the back of my mind like a tab left open, but it didn't take over the day. On the first day of stats, I got there early and sat in my usual spot, 3rd row, aisle seat, close enough to hear without feeling trapped. The classroom smelled like dry erase marker and stale air, the kind of room that never fully aired out. People drifted in, laptops opened. A couple of students argued quietly about whether the professor was strict. Then the door opened again, and I saw him. Mason walked in like he still belonged everywhere. Not loud, not flashy, just confident in a way that used to pull everyone toward him. He paused when he spotted me, and I watched the recognition land on his face. Then the recalculation. He kept walking, slower now, scanning me like he wasn't sure he was seeing the right person. I didn't look away. I didn't smile either. He came down the aisle and stopped next to my row. "Wow," he said softly, like it was a compliment he couldn't help. I almost didn't recognize you. I nodded once. Hey. He looked relieved that I'd spoken at all. This is crazy. I didn't know you were here. I've been here, I said. It wasn't sharp, just factual. He laughed, a small sound like he was trying to reset the mood. Right. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know we were at the same school. I didn't offer anything. I let the quiet do the work. He glanced at the seat beside me, then sat anyway, leaving a polite amount of space like he'd learned something about boundaries in the last few years. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. How have you been? He asked. Like, really? I'm good, I said. He waited, like he expected more, then started filling the silence himself. He talked about transferring, about how the other place wasn't a good fit, about how he was taking things more seriously now. He said he had an apartment off campus. He asked my major and acted impressed when I told him about my research project. I watched him while he spoke. His tone was familiar, easy, charming. The difference was that it didn't do anything to me anymore. It was just a tool he used, and I could see the seams. When the professor came in and class started, Mason didn't stop trying. He'd whisper a comment about a slide. He'd nudge his notebook closer like we were studying partners. I kept my eyes on the front of the room. I answered one question when he asked it. Then I went back to taking notes. After class, students packed up and stood in a loose line near the door, all trying to leave without bumping each other. Mason walked beside me like it was automatic. We should catch up, he said. Grab coffee, like old times. I kept walking at the same pace. I have a lab. What about later? He pressed. Tonight? I'm busy, I said. He smiled like he could wear down that answer if he just kept showing up. Okay, another day then. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I walked out of the building and headed straight toward the lab. By the time I got to my research room, my hands were steady. My thoughts were clear. That was the part of myself I trusted now, the part that didn't get swept up. My professor, Dr. Harlan, was already there when I arrived, leaning over a table with a stack of printed reports. He barely looked up when I came in. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied, and I put my bag down and opened my project log. The log was a simple spreadsheet I kept for the lab. Date, task, dataset version, notes, next steps. It was boring on purpose. When things went wrong, we didn't guess. We checked the log. I stared at that sheet for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I added a line to my personal notes file, not the lab log. A separate document I kept for my own life, the same way I kept my calendar. Date, time, location, interaction. It was one sentence. Saw Mason Keller in stats. Attempted casual reconnection. I didn't write it like a diary. I wrote it like a record. Because I'd learned something about people who rewrite history when it suits them. If I ever needed to remember exactly what happened, I wanted the facts. Over the next week, he started appearing in places that made coincidence feel thin. Tuesday, he was at the library's second-floor study area during the window I always used between classes. I noticed him 3 tables away, laptop open, eyes flicking up too often. Wednesday, he was in line at my usual coffee spot at 2:30, and when he turned and saw me, his face lit up like he'd been hoping for it. He asked what I was ordering. I told him. I moved to a table and put my earbuds in before he could turn it into a conversation. Thursday, he showed up to the environmental group meeting I'd been in since freshman year. He walked in late, scanned the room, then sat directly across from me. Tessa leaned toward me and whispered, "Is he doing this on purpose?" I looked at her and kept my face calm. I can handle it. I meant it. Not because I thought I could outplay him in some dramatic way, because my life was structured now. I had routines. I had people who respected me. I had the ability to keep someone at the edges without making a scene. And I had systems. That night, I opened my laptop and did 3 practical things. Step 1, I checked my privacy settings on everything that mattered. Social accounts, student profile visibility, the public club roster. Step 2, I sent a short message to the environmental club president asking if they could stop sharing member phone numbers or contact info without consent. I kept it polite. I framed it as general safety, no names. Step 3, I updated my phone settings so unknown numbers went straight to voicemail and texts from unknown senders stayed muted. Then I closed my laptop and made dinner like it was any other Thursday. Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed once. A new text from a number I didn't have saved. "Hey, it's Mason. Got your number from someone in the group. Hope that's okay. Thought we could catch up properly since we're both here now." I stared at the screen without moving. Then I opened my notes file, added a new line with the timestamp, and took a screenshot of the message. After that, I set the phone face down on the table and sat there for a moment in the quiet, deciding what I wanted my next move to be. I didn't answer right away. I finished what I was doing first, washed the dish in my sink, wiped the counter, put my keys back on the hook by the door. Then I picked up my phone again and read the message one more time. It wasn't threatening. It was friendly on the surface. That was part of the problem. Friendly gives people room to pretend they meant no harm. I replied 2 hours later with one word. Sure, if he wanted to talk, we could talk. But I wanted it on my terms, in public, during daylight, with a clear start and a clear end. We agreed on Monday after my morning classes at the cafe on the south end of campus. I chose it because it was busy and bright, with tables close together and employees who would notice if someone caused a scene. Monday morning, I stood outside the cafe for a full minute with my hand on the door handle, listening to the sound of the espresso machine and the low murmur of conversations inside. Then I went in. Mason was already there in a corner, 2 drinks on the table like he was trying to show effort. He stood up when he saw me. "I remembered," he said. "Vanilla." I sat down and said thank you. I didn't smile much. I wasn't trying to punish him. I just wasn't giving him warmth he hadn't earned. He started talking immediately, like silence made him nervous. Classes, apartment, how he was getting serious this time. He asked about my major and my research and looked genuinely interested. He complimented my hair, then my shoes, then said I seemed different. I kept my answers clean and simple, short, polite, factual. At one point he said, "We should go to that party Friday, together." I said, "I already have plans." He tried a different angle. "Okay, then coffee again. Just us, like catch up for real." I looked at him and waited calmly for the part where he'd acknowledge the only reason we needed to catch up at all. He didn't. He talked around high school like it was a blurry season he barely remembered. He said things like, "It's wild how long it's been," and "We were all so dumb back then." But he never named what he did. He never said sorry. He never took ownership. After about an hour, he leaned forward like he was about to say something important. "I've been thinking about you a lot since I saw you," he said. "I always wondered what would have happened if we stayed in touch." I nodded once, neutral. He watched my face like he was searching for a sign. "I want to hang out more. Actually hang out." I kept my voice even. "That sounds nice." He brightened immediately. "Great. So what's your schedule?" I checked the time on my phone. "I have to go." He looked disappointed but tried to hide it. "Text me?" "I'll text you sometime," I said, and I stood up. I walked out before he could pin me down. Back at my apartment, Tessa was on the couch with her laptop open, hair twisted up with a clip, reading something for class. She glanced up the second I came in. "How was it?" she asked. "It was exactly what I expected," I said, setting my bag down. "He wants a fresh start, but he wants it without admitting what he did." Tessa's mouth tightened. "So he's pretending it never happened." "Pretty much." She closed her laptop slowly. "What are you going to do?" I sat down across from her and thought about it in a practical way, not an emotional one. "Nothing dramatic," I said. "I'm just not giving him access." That became the plan. He started texting the next day. A meme about our stats professor, a question about a homework problem, an invite to a campus concert, another meme, a good morning that made me stare at my screen for a moment because it felt too familiar for someone who still hadn't apologized. I responded late, briefly, and only when it made sense. If he asked a real class question, I answered the question. If he sent an invite, I said I was busy. If he sent something that was clearly fishing for emotional closeness, I didn't engage. I kept it consistent, not rude, not warm. And because I'm the kind of person who likes clarity, I kept track. Not obsessively, just enough to stay grounded. Date, time, what he asked, what I answered. It helped me stay steady, especially on days when his persistence made me feel like I was back in that old version of myself for a second. 2 weeks later, Tessa dragged me to a house party off campus. I didn't want to go. I had reading to do. She told me I was allowed to have a life and physically pulled me off the couch. The house was crowded and loud, the kind of place where every surface smelled faintly like spilled beer. I was in the kitchen getting water when someone touched my shoulder. I turned and saw Ryan Mercer. He'd been one of Mason's closest friends in high school, one of the guys who'd been laughing at the back door that night. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "Can we talk?" he asked. I followed him to a quieter corner of the living room where the music was muffled. He didn't waste time. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened back then. I was a jerk, and I laughed, and it was cruel." I looked at him for a moment, measuring whether he meant it. His eyes were steady. His hands were still. No grin, no performance. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you saying that." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Then he hesitated and added, "Mason talks about you a lot, like constantly. He's confused why you won't give him a chance." I nodded once. "I'm not confused." Ryan gave a small, awkward smile. "Yeah, I figured." We talked for a few minutes about school, nothing deep. Then he left, and I went to find Tessa. On the walk home that night, my phone buzzed with another message from Mason. "Did you have fun tonight? I think I saw you." I didn't respond. When we got back, I kicked off my shoes, washed my face, and set my phone on my desk. Then I opened my notes and wrote one more line because the pattern was getting clearer. He wasn't just trying to reconnect, he was trying to wear me down, and I was deciding quietly and carefully what my next step needed to be. After that party, Mason eased up for about 2 days. Not because he suddenly understood, more like he was recalibrating. I could feel it in the quieter phone, the absence of him at my usual library table, the way he stopped hovering at the coffee shop line like it was a scheduled stop. Then he came back with a different strategy. Shorter texts, more practical reasons to reach out. Homework questions, club logistics, things he could justify to himself as normal. I kept doing what I'd been doing. Calm, consistent, no access. Around that time, someone else became part of my routine in a way that was actually easy. His name was Eli Carter. I met him through a study group for stats, and the first thing I noticed was that he listened like he wasn't just waiting to talk. He showed up on time. He didn't flirt in a way that made me feel cornered. He just did the work, then asked if I wanted to grab a coffee and review the practice problems together. It wasn't a big moment. It was simple. We started meeting once or twice a week, sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer if we got stuck on something. It felt comfortable. No guessing, no tests. I didn't announce it to anyone. I didn't post anything. But people notice patterns, and Mason was the kind of person who noticed patterns when they involved him. The environmental group announced a weekend service trip in early October. Not camping exactly, more like a volunteer weekend at a state park about an hour outside the city. We were helping with trail cleanup, planting, and a community education booth. It was structured, with a schedule and sign-in sheets. That was partly why I signed up. It felt safe. Tessa signed up too, and so did Eli, because he needed volunteer hours for a scholarship program. A few other people I knew casually were going. It was a good mix. When the sign-up sheet went around at the meeting, Mason added his name right after I did. I watched his pen move across the paper, slow and deliberate, like he wanted me to see it. The day before the trip, he texted me. "Are you going? We could carpool." I replied 5 minutes later. "I'm riding with friends." He sent back a thumbs up. Nothing else. But I could picture the disappointment behind it. Saturday morning, we met in the parking lot by the student center at 6:30. The air was cold enough to make my nose sting. People loaded coolers into trunks and checked their names off on a clipboard. Someone passed around granola bars like it was a peace offering. Tessa and I rode with 2 other girls from the group. Eli drove separately with his roommate. When we got to the park, the morning light was thin and pale, filtering through tall trees. The smell was damp leaves and pine. Everyone scattered to assign tasks with gloves and trash bags and rakes. Mason tried to attach himself to me immediately. He showed up at the trail section where I was working, even though the coordinator had placed him somewhere else. He picked up trash beside me like it was an accident. He kept asking questions that didn't need asking. Do you need another bag? Are you cold? Did you sleep okay? I kept my answers short and turned my focus outward. I pulled other people into the conversation. I asked the coordinator if she needed help with the booth setup. I walked over to check on Eli's group and brought back extra water. If Mason tried to make it private, I made it public. By late afternoon, everyone was tired in that steady, physical way. We ate dinner at picnic tables under a shelter. Someone had put out string lights, and they made the whole place look softer than it actually was. People laughed more easily when their bodies were worn out. After dinner, a few students started a casual game, nothing serious, just a circle of people asking dumb questions and daring each other to do harmless things. It wasn't truth or dare exactly, but it had the same energy. I stayed for a while because Tessa was laughing and leaning into my shoulder, and it felt normal. Then it was Mason's turn. Someone asked if he was interested in anyone here. The air shifted. I felt it in the quiet that followed, the way several people leaned in a little, pretending not to. Mason looked across the circle and locked his eyes on me. Yes, he said. I am. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't raise his voice. That made it worse because it sounded sincere enough that anyone who didn't know the full history could mistake it for something sweet. Tessa's eyebrows lifted. Eli glanced at me, quick and careful, like he was checking whether I was okay. I kept my face neutral. I took a sip from my cup and looked away. The game moved on, but the mood didn't fully recover. People kept sneaking glances between us like they were waiting for a scene. Around 9, I stood up and said I needed water. I walked toward the coolers near the parked cars, away from the shelter lights. The night air was colder now. The stars were sharp overhead, and the gravel under my shoes made small, crunching sounds that felt too loud. I found a bottle and twisted the cap off. Footsteps behind me, then my name. Quiet. Mara. I turned. Mason stood a few feet away with his hands in his jacket pockets. The shelter lights hit one side of his face, leaving the other side in shadow. I was talking about you, he said. I know, I replied. He took a slow breath. I'm serious, about you, about who you are now. I didn't step back. I didn't step forward. I just stayed where I was. I want a real chance, he said. A real date. Not whatever we were back then. I'm not that person anymore. I held the bottle against my palm and let the silence sit long enough to feel intentional. Then I said, calmly, I need time. His shoulders loosened like he heard hope in that. Okay, yeah, take time. I'll wait. I nodded once. We walked back separately. The next week was midterms. My days were full. Library, lab, study group, work blocks. I didn't spend time analyzing Mason's feelings. I didn't need to. I already understood the pattern. Still, he texted. Monday. Thinking about what I said. Can we talk? Wednesday. Have you had time to think? Friday. Are you free this weekend? Just coffee. I delayed responses. I answered once, briefly, that I was slammed with exams. True, and also useful. Tessa noticed the way I'd gone quieter in the evenings. One night she came into the kitchen while I was making tea and leaned against the counter. You're thinking about him, she said. I poured hot water into a mug and watched the tea bag darken the surface. I'm thinking about whether I want to say it out loud, I replied. Say what out loud? The truth, I said. Not the soft version. She didn't push. She just nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. 2 days later, I was walking with Eli after our stats review session. The sidewalk was scattered with dry leaves. The campus lights were starting to come on, that warm glow that makes everything feel calmer than it really is. Eli asked carefully, Is there history with that guy? I didn't give him the full story. Not then. I gave him the clean version. He humiliated me in high school. I said. In front of people. On purpose. Eli's face tightened, quiet anger that he didn't try to perform. And now he's here, I added, acting like it didn't matter. Eli didn't ask for details. He didn't demand a reaction from me. He just said, "You don't owe him anything." That simple sentence landed harder than it should have. The next day, Mason texted again. "Can we meet? I don't like where this is heading." I stared at the message. Then I opened my notes file, looked at the timeline I'd been keeping, and felt my own calm settle in. If I was going to confront him, I was going to do it the same way I did everything else now, on purpose, in daylight, in a public place, with a clear end time. I replied, "Tomorrow, 3, Student Center Cafe, 1 hour." He responded immediately, "Thank you, seriously." The next afternoon I got there 5 minutes early and chose a table near the windows, not tucked away, not isolated. The cafe smelled like espresso and warm bread. People moved in and out with backpacks and headphones. It was ordinary. That was what I wanted. Mason arrived right at 3. He looked nervous, like he'd been practicing what to say. He sat down and reached for a smile. "I'm glad you agreed to this," he said. "I feel like we've been circling each other for weeks." I nodded once. "We have." He leaned forward. "I want to be honest. I like you. I think about you all the time. And I don't understand why you're being so distant when we're clearly— we have something." I watched him for a second. I noticed the way he framed it. Like distance was something happening to him, not something I was choosing. I kept my voice steady. "You don't understand because you keep skipping the part that explains it." His face shifted. Confusion first, then something defensive. "You mean high school?" he said. "Yes," I replied. He exhaled and made a small shrug, like he wanted to minimize it without looking like he was minimizing it. "That was a long time ago," he said. "We were kids. Everyone was drunk and stupid. Things got out of hand. I didn't react to that. I didn't argue the details. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, 'You planned it.'" His mouth opened slightly, then closed. I continued, calm and precise. "You got me alone. You told me what I wanted to hear. You kissed me while your friends watched, and you laughed. You said you told them I'd fall for it." His eyes flickered down to the table. I let the quiet stretch. Not to punish him, but to make sure the reality stayed in the room. Then I said, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not trying to get revenge, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't matter." Mason's throat moved like he swallowed. "I said I felt bad," he muttered. I nodded once. "You've said you felt bad about how it ended. You've said things got weird. You've blamed your friends. You've blamed alcohol. But you haven't actually taken responsibility in a way that matches what you did." His eyes snapped back up, frustration rising. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, a little too sharp. "Grovel forever?" "No," I said. That seemed to throw him off. He blinked. I kept going, still calm. "I want you to understand something simple. Forgiveness doesn't mean access, and it doesn't mean I owe you a fresh start." He stared at me like he was trying to find a loophole. "So there's no chance?" he asked. I didn't rush the answer. I looked out the window for a second. People crossing the quad, a student on a bike, normal life moving forward. Then I looked back at him. "I'm happy with my life," I said. "I'm not interested in dating someone who's attached to the worst moment of my old life." His face tightened, the emotion finally breaking through his control. "I've changed," he said. "I'm trying. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counts for you," I replied. "It doesn't obligate me." He sat back like the words hit him physically. For a moment he looked genuinely lost, like he'd never expected consequences to be this quiet and this final. My phone buzzed once. Not a call, just a reminder notification. I glanced at it and saw the time. 3:54. I stood up and slid my chair in gently. "That's my hour," I said. "I hope you keep doing better, but I need space." Mason's voice cracked slightly when he spoke again. "So what am I supposed to do when I see you?" I met his eyes. "Be respectful, and let it be what it is." He nodded slowly, but his face didn't look like someone who'd gotten what he wanted. It looked like someone who finally understood he wasn't in control of the outcome. I left the cafe without rushing. Outside, the air was cooler than it had been earlier. I walked across the quad, steady, feeling something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was still there. My phone stayed quiet the rest of the day. That night, I opened my notes file, added one last line to the timeline, and saved it. Then I set the laptop aside and made tea, listening to the water heat and the small sounds of my apartment settling. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for him to appear somewhere. I was just living. For 3 days after that meeting, nothing happened. No texts, no pop-up appearances at my table, no sudden coincidence in the coffee line. I noticed the absence more than I expected, not because I missed him, but because my body had gotten used to scanning for him. On the 4th day, I saw him across the quad outside the science building. He was alone, hands in his pockets, looking down at his phone. When he looked up and spotted me, he didn't walk over. He just nodded once, like he was acknowledging the boundary out loud without saying anything. I nodded back and kept walking. That was the first consequence that felt real. Not him feeling bad, not him saying the right words. The behavior changed. That weekend, the environmental group held another meeting to debrief the service trip and finalize who was doing what for the education booth later in the month. The room smelled like wet jackets and recycled paper. People were tired and a little unfocused. When the coordinator passed around a new contact sheet, I noticed something different. Instead of phone numbers, it listed university emails only. At the bottom, in small print, there was a note about consent and privacy. I didn't react outwardly, I just wrote my email and passed it along. After the meeting, the club president pulled me aside near the door. "Hey," she said quietly, "thanks for that message you sent a while back about contact info. We updated the process. It should have been that way already." I nodded. "I appreciate it." That was another consequence, small but concrete. A system changed. Not because anyone was trying to protect my feelings, but because it was the right procedure. Later that night, I was at my desk in my apartment, finishing a lab summary for Dr. Harlan. The document was dry and technical, but it kept my mind steady. I worked through it the same way I always did, line by line, saving versions as I went. When I finished, I opened the folder on my laptop where I'd been keeping the screenshots and notes about Mason. It wasn't dramatic. It was a simple folder labeled Fall Semester. Inside it was a subfolder labeled Boundaries, and inside that were a few time-stamped screenshots and a plain text file with dates. I looked at it for a moment and realized something important. I didn't need to keep doing this forever. The purpose of the folder had never been revenge. It was stability. It was reality. It was proof, mostly for myself, that I hadn't imagined the pattern, and now the pattern had shifted. I moved the folder into an archive directory and added one final line to the text file. Oct 14. Student Center Conversation. Clear boundary stated. Contact stopped. Then I closed it. 2 weeks passed with no direct contact. Life filled the space the way it always does when something stops taking up oxygen. My research project got heavier as we approached a deadline. The lab stayed cold and over-air-conditioned. I drank too much coffee. I met Eli twice to review for a stats exam, and once we ended up talking longer than planned, not about Mason, just about family and post-grad plans and how campus felt smaller every year. One afternoon, I ran into Ryan Mercer again outside the library. He was carrying a stack of books and looked like he'd slept maybe 4 hours. He nodded at me and said, "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. It was true. He hesitated, then added, "He's keeping his distance. He's not thrilled, but he's doing it." I nodded. Good. Ryan looked relieved, like he'd been hoping it would settle without a blow-up. Then he said something else, almost like he couldn't help it. "He's been telling people he's in therapy." I kept my face neutral. "Okay." Ryan shrugged. "I'm not saying it to make you feel bad, just, it's real. He's trying." "I hope it helps him," I said, and I meant it in the limited way that sentence can be meant. I didn't owe him suffering. I didn't owe him a comeback story either. Ryan nodded and walked off toward the library doors. A few days after that, Mason sent one message, just one. It came in around noon on a Tuesday. I'm not asking for anything, I just want to say I'm sorry I planned that night. I thought it was funny. It wasn't. It was cruel. I understand why you want space. I'll respect it. I read it once, then again. It was the first time he'd said it plainly. No alcohol excuse, no blaming friends, no soft language. I didn't respond immediately. I took a screenshot and saved it into the archived folder, not because I expected to use it, but because it belonged with the record. Then I set the phone face down and went back to my work. That evening, I told Tessa about the message while we were making dinner. She was chopping onions at the counter, eyes watering, refusing to admit it. That's different, she said. It is, I replied. Do you want to answer? I thought about it honestly. Not what would be nice. Not what would make me look mature. What would actually match the boundary I'd set. Yes, I said. One response. Clear. I picked up my phone and typed it carefully. Thank you for acknowledging it directly. I accept the apology. I still need distance. Please don't contact me again unless it's necessary for class or club logistics. I read it twice before sending. Then I sent it and put the phone down. After that, the silence held. He didn't break it with memes. He didn't test the edges. He didn't try to turn my response into a conversation. If we were in the same place, he kept it neutral. If we made eye contact, it was a small nod. Nothing more. A month later, at a crowded off-campus party, I overheard someone telling a story about a high school prank, the kind of story people usually tell to prove they were wild once. The details were close enough that I felt that old drop in my stomach for half a second. Before I could decide what to do with my face, I heard Mason's voice from somewhere behind the group. He didn't say my name. He didn't point at me. He didn't dramatize it. He just said, calmly, I did something like that once. It was the worst thing I've ever done to someone. It wasn't funny. It was cruelty. The conversation stalled. Someone muttered, oh, like they didn't expect accountability at a party. Then the group shifted away from that topic, almost relieved. I stood still for a moment, holding a plastic cup of water, listening to the music thumping through the walls. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure done the way closure usually happens in real life. Not a big moment, not a perfect ending, just a pattern changing and staying changed. On the walk home, the night air was cold and clean. Tessa walked beside me with her hands tucked into her sleeves. You okay? She asked. Yes, I said, and I didn't have to convince myself. When we got back, I took my shoes off at the door, washed my hands, and opened my laptop. I didn't go into the archived folder. Instead, I opened my calendar for the next week and filled in what mattered. Lab hours, study blocks, a dinner with Eli, a meeting with Dr. Harlan. Then I closed the laptop and let the apartment go quiet around me. The kind of quiet that means nothing is chasing you anymore. A few weeks later, I was alone in the lab on a Saturday morning, finishing a small piece of analysis before our project review meeting. The building was nearly empty, so every sound felt sharper. The hum of the ventilation, the soft click of my keyboard, the faint squeak of my chair when I shifted. I like those quiet hours. Nothing social to manage, no guessing, just work and clear progress. When I finished the run, I saved the output, updated the shared log, and emailed Dr. Harlan a short summary. Then I closed my laptop and sat still for a minute, letting the calm settle. I realized I hadn't thought about Mason in days, not in a forced way, not in the way you try to train yourself to forget someone. More like he simply wasn't relevant to what my life required anymore. The systems I'd built were doing their job, my routines were steady, my relationships were steady. That afternoon, I went home, cleaned the apartment in a slow, practical way, laundry folded, counters wiped, the little pile of mail sorted into recycle and keep. Tessa was out, so the place stayed quiet except for the washing machine and the occasional sound of footsteps in the hallway. I made tea and sat by the window with my mug, watching students cross the parking lot with backpacks and coffee cups, all of them moving like they had somewhere to be. The day looked normal. That mattered to me. Eli came over later with takeout and a practice exam. We spread papers across the table and worked through problems. When we got stuck, we talked it out. When we finished, we ate and watched something mindless on TV. It wasn't romantic in a performative way. It was just calm and consistent. At some point, he looked at me and said, "You seem lighter lately." I nodded. "I am." He didn't ask for the whole story. He didn't need it. Around the same time, the environmental group president sent another email about updated safety procedures, consent before sharing contact details, clear reporting channels if anyone felt uncomfortable, meeting norms that made it easier to step away without explanations. I read it and thought quietly that this was the kind of outcome I actually cared about. Not someone regretting what they did, not someone wanting another chance, just fewer situations where people could get cornered and laughed at while everyone pretended it was harmless. A week after that, a first-year student named Paige asked if she could talk to me after our group meeting. We were stacking chairs and putting supplies away in a closet off the main room. Her hands kept adjusting the strap of her tote bag like she didn't know what to do with them. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure," I replied, keeping my voice normal. She hesitated, then said, "There's this guy in my dorm who keeps showing up where I am. He says it's coincidence, but it doesn't feel like it. I don't want to make it a big thing, I just don't know how to handle it." I listened without interrupting. I didn't jump into drama. I didn't tell her to confront him or post about it. I just asked a few calm questions. Where it was happening, whether he had her number, whether anyone else had noticed. Then I told her the simplest version of what I'd learned. "Pick one clear boundary," I said. "Say it once. Keep it consistent. And if you want help, use the reporting channel. Quietly, early. You don't have to wait until it gets worse to take it seriously." She looked relieved in a way that made my chest tighten for a second. Not because it reminded me of my past, but because I understood what it felt like to want permission to trust your own instincts. When she left, I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the buildings settle around me, and I realized that this was what moving on actually looked like. Not a perfect ending, not everyone turning into a better person because of one conversation. Just me living in a way that kept my life orderly and safe, and using what I knew when someone else needed it. That night, back at home, I did the same small reset I always do when I want my mind to feel clear. Dishes washed, phone plugged in, backpack repacked for the morning, calendar checked. I put the phone face down, turned off the kitchen light, and stood in the quiet for a second before heading to bed. And if you've been listening and you've ever had someone treat your feelings like a game or show up in your life acting like the past didn't happen, you're not alone. You don't owe anyone access. You can be calm, clear, and done. If this story felt familiar to you, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps this channel reach more people who need a quiet place to process things. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always like seeing where everyone is checking in from. 2 popular stories are coming up next, so I'll see you there.